obviously Housing Authority of Cook County, one of the biggest in the country,
Yes.
as well as Cook County is simply one of the largest counties in the United States.
Correct.
How big is your department? How big is a need for public and assistance housing in Cook County?
Well, that's a great double-edged question. So we're a very large authority, as you said. We own about 2,000 units in the northern and southern suburbs outside the city, and we have about 14,000 housing vouchers that we administer. So that we pay, generally, the housing authority pays 70% of the rent, and the tenant pays 30% of its income for the rent. And this is in the private sector. Mm-hmm. But your question about the need is a good one. Less than 1 in 4 people who need housing assistance in Cook County actually receive it. It's somewhere in the neighborhood of 22%, Sergio. Mm-hmm. And it's really unfortunate because we could be helping so many more people. Unfortunately, then, they have to double up, maybe live in substandard housing, go from neighbor to neighbor or relative to relative. And it's really disappointing. We would love to see the amount of housing assistance increase, but we know for the past several years, and probably for the next several years, that's not very likely to happen. Mm-hmm. So what we're doing is we're taking what we have and trying to be more innovative in the way we use it.
Mm-hmm. Also, the real important issue is the access to affordable housing. I mean, the fact that you're here today and you're an expert, excellent resume on public housing throughout the years. So that means key is to get people know what to do in order to qualify for public or assisted housing.
Right, exactly. So the best way to find out what we have is our website, which is www.thehacc.org. And then if any of your viewers have any specific questions, I encourage them to call me as well. Mm-hmm. I'll give my number, 312-542-4851. Generally, to qualify, you have to be low income. And by low income, I mean for a family of 2, say, for example, your income can't exceed $24,000. Okay. So we're talking about folks with limited means. Mm-hmm. We assist seniors, we assist people with disabilities, and we assist families. Mm-hmm. We're able to open waiting lists from time to time. Okay. Right now, we have some openings. For example, in Riverdale, Illinois, the waiting list will be open. In Summit, Illinois, the waiting list will be open. Right now, in the northern suburbs, we don't have openings in the waiting list. However, I do expect some of those to open this year. And we own buildings in suburbs like Wheeling, Skokie, Arlington Heights, Des Plaines, Evanston. So these are good areas with transportation. And the other important thing to note is we're in the process of rehabilitating the entire housing stock, built in the 70s, some in the 50s. Very important to keep this stock viable.
Exactly. How do you ensure that there are appropriate places to create public housing without, kind of changing the dynamic of particular neighborhood?
Right. So we're very, it's a good question. We want to make sure that our housing fits in. In other words, if you look at our housing, basically, especially after it's rehabbed, mm-hmm. you won't be able to tell if it's who lives there. Yeah. I mean, the housing in Evanston looks like, and I'd love to show you the unit sometime. I mean, we would all love to live there. So, and we own a lot of scattered site housing in the northern suburbs too, and that's very important. You don't want it to look and stand out like, oh, there's public housing, there's poor people. To the extent that we can integrate the affordable housing into the broader neighborhood, it gains more acceptance.
Mm-hmm. So how do we go about what's in the future? Obviously, new administration in Washington, D.C. making it somewhat challenging for big metropolis as Chicago.
Well, it certainly has, and unfortunately, the impact's been felt already. Yeah. The investor market is very skittish right now. We rely on low-income housing tax credits, basically to build and rehab housing. And right now, because of the talk about tax reform, what are the new corporate rates going to be? Mm-hmm. The appetite for those credits is skittish. Is probably the right word, Sergio. So how does that affect us directly? Well, we right now have a $75 million bond deal about to be released, but the value of those credits are now in question. So that means that I might be able to do 30 or 40% less work on these buildings, right?
Yeah.
And so it is, and on top of that, traditionally, Democrats have been more accepting and supportive of affordable housing programs, certainly. That's not to say that Republicans won't be, but if we look at history, we have to be a bit concerned. And the new HUD designee, HUD Secretary, Mr. Carson, has not really expressed an affinity, I think, for government-supported housing. But to get back to your first question, it doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat, independent, socialist, whatever. People need housing.
Exactly.
Something's got to be done. So I'm hoping that as part of this whole change agenda that Mr. Trump is what elected him, and in his desire to rebuild the country's infrastructure, housing needs to be part of that infrastructure, because it is. So there is some hope.
Especially in cities like Chicago, where we have currently, after the market crash, we're seeing those property values go up and up and up. So city of Chicago becoming more and more gentrified, the city that you cannot afford a $500,000 home. You have to live outside of the.
No, it's really quite a phenomenon, and it's happening in other places too, where the central cities now are becoming unaffordable, and now you go to the inner ring and even the outer ring suburbs, and that's what happened. It's what's happened in suburban Chicago.
How do you address that, though?
It's difficult. There are now as many poor people outside the city in Cook County than there are inside. So we're part of building this whole infrastructure of support services, because we have a lot of people that, we're lucky that they have a roof over their head, but they need schooling, right? They need nutritious food. They need job opportunities. So we have a whole program that I'm actually sort of personally running to help people reach self-sufficiency, but first and foremost, make sure their basic needs are met. That's what's most important. Because a lot of people in our country today, as you know, are doing very well. God bless them. But too many aren't. Thankfully, the state of Illinois' failure to pass a budget hasn't hurt us too bad, because we're mostly federally funded. But we were really hurt a couple of years ago when the sequester happened, you probably remember. And there was this across-the-board cut. And we must have lost 300 or 400 vouchers in the process. We've since made that up. But that's why the question about the administration and the budget, follow the money, as we all know. And I'm frankly worried about what a Paul Ryan budget's going to look like for housing.
So what are your hopes for 2017?
Well, it's a big year for us. We're going to have 750 apartments under renovation at one time. So I want to get as many people as possible working. I want to get as many small and minority businesses on the jobs. So please, if anybody's interested also in doing work for us, we have it. Because we want to make this is a workforce project. It's rehabilitating housing to keep it viable, but it also provides huge opportunities for the community.
Richard Manocchio, Executive Director of Cook County Housing Authority, thank you so much for being our guest.
Thank you.
Good luck in 2017.
Thank you, sir.